Hello and welcome to SRIRAM's IES. In this series of Indian economy, we all know that we are actually discussing this book written by SRIRAM sir himself. And why is this book important? Because you might also have referred that all the toppers of, I would say, past 3 to 4 decades have been referring to SRIRAM sir's notes. And this book is a value addition to those notes. In this book, there is some more value addition which we are doing in these lectures. So therefore, this lecture series is something which can actually help you to understand the concepts and to keep your concepts intact. Now today, we are discussing one such thing which actually changed the economic and I would say the history of India. And it is a blot in the history of, I would say, entire world, because this sort of a pandemic was not seen in earlier history. Earlier we also saw swine flu, we saw Russian flu, we saw multiple epidemics in some regions, but COVID-19 was a pandemic, and the pandemics which preceded this were less in intensity and I would say less in consequences. However, now when we talk about economics and pandemics, we should also understand that every opportunity comes with, or I would say rather, every disaster comes with an opportunity in disguise. Now we should understand that what governments have to do over here, what is the role of state in this sort of an issue, and why should we think about state's role over here. So when we talk about state's role, in the classical economics, we witnessed that in the era of 1700s, there were classicals who usually argued about no state intervention or I would say minimal state intervention. And before that, we used to have that state used to control everything, because these classicals somehow represented the capitalist ideology, somehow inspired with the thoughts of, I would say, democracy, liberalism and the new ideas of Renaissance. But when we see to the other side of state's role, which we earlier had in the communism or I would say in the socialism. Now we remember that socialism actually argues that there should be more role to the state. State should have more control over the resources. The ownership of the resources should be with the state. State should control the production. All the questions of economy, that what to produce, how to produce and for whom to produce shall be answered either by the private players in a free market economy or by state itself in the socialist model of economy. So therefore, the discussion happened and the arguments kept on emerging. But when we reached an era that is currently which we have, we know that there have been instances of 1929 global economic crisis. There has been an instance of 2008 global financial crisis, 2012 Eurozone sovereign debt crisis and the crisis of COVID-19, when the role of the state was again questioned, that the role of the state in economy and in market and in ensuring the public welfare is pertinent. So therefore, this role of the state says that whenever we have a pandemic kind of situation, whenever the market fails, there the role of state increases. Why? Because the state should actively be a provider rather than a facilitator, which it usually is in the normal times. Say for example, currently we are operating free market economics, we are operating a mixed economic model, and in this present state of Indian economy, we argue strictly about that there should be the role of the state should be just the facilitator and regulator of the market. Say for example, whenever there is a new technology about bitcoins, there is new technology about digital economy, digital currencies, or I would say stable coins, cryptocurrencies, there we argue that state should regulate it. State should regulate artificial intelligence, state should regulate the LLMs, state should regulate the deepfakes, state should regulate the digital currency. We argue about this. We say that yes, that is the prerogative of the state, state should do it. Because if we let it in the free market, it has many negative consequences also. Understood? But then again, there is one more role which is critical of a state when it comes to such pandemics. When it comes to such pandemics, state should not only be provider of, say, food, shelter, or healthcare. State should not only provide the basic necessities, rather it should also provide the stimulus. The stimulus to recover economy. Now what kind of stimulus? Say for example, state can provide fiscal stimulus. Now what do we mean by that? State can provide easy loans, no interest loans, credit guarantee loans. State can provide this so that investors can back again invest into the economy. We can revive the economy post these pandemics. But there is a problem associated to this. Say, even if, understand this, even if state provides stimulus, say state gave a loan of 10 lakh crore rupees. State said that we will provide, just like the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, which was approximately of this number, which said that we will provide the state, we will provide the private sector, we will provide this much of credit guarantee loans. There is a huge economic package which state introduced under the PM Garib Kalyan Yojana when post-COVID recovery was under question. But then again, what happened to this capital? Understand this. If we provide the capital to the economy, if state is providing the capital to the economy, if it is injecting the capital into the economy, say it is developing infrastructure projects, it had some projects on the shelf and it is now running them. It is usually said in macroeconomics and in modern day economics that whenever a state is under question, whenever there is a recession in the state, whenever there is a recession in the economy, what we should do? We should beforehand keep a plan ready for some infrastructural projects. Say for example, there is a plan ready, earlier plan, there is a plan ready that we will build a north to south corridor from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. There will be an industrial corridor which will be developed along the national highway from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. Now we know this. This plan is proposed and this plan is kept as it is. The DPR, everything is ready. Now state just needs to inject money. When is the right time to inject money for this? When economy is under a slump. Why? Because at that time it will provide double benefit. It will first recover the economy from the slump and then it will also boost the economy for further growth. So therefore, usually economists suggest that we should keep such plans ready and then start them right away whenever we face problems, because these are the medicines for the economic, I would say, slowdown. Do you understand this? Therefore, at this point of time, we should also recall ourselves one more important concept which we discussed, that was Malthus' gloomy population theory. Do you remember that we discussed this in the very first lecture of this series. In the first lecture, we discussed about that there is scarcity of resources. There is scarcity of resources, and the food, or I would say production in the economy is increasing as an arithmetic progression. But when we talk about the population, that population is increasing in terms of geometric progression. That is a problem. That is a problem for economy. Say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the population is increasing in 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. Now the question of economy is that how will we satisfy this population with this less of production? That is a problem. And whenever you see that there is recession in economy, there is an era of pandemic, when there is no production happening in the economy, when the economy is under recession, when the economy is under a slump, at that point of time, don't you question yourself that population is already increasing. Maybe the death rate has increased because of the pandemic, but the population is still increasing. The population is still increasing. However, the production has stopped at all. At that point of time, to revive the production, state must give impetus, state must give stimulus. However, there is one big problem. That is, whenever the income goes to people, whenever you receive income, what do you do with that income? You either save that income, or you do consumption, or you do savings. There are two things only which you can do. Either you go for savings or you go for consumption. In economics, we call it marginal propensity to consume and marginal propensity to save. Simple. Now understand, if your income is increasing, say for example, government started to give direct benefit transfer of 2,000 rupees or 5,000 rupees under this pandemic era. Even the Kisans were given 6,000 rupees under the Kisan scheme. Multiple other people were given some of the benefits under this Kisan scheme. Say for example, you were given food grains, free food grains. Everyone was given free food grains under Garib, Kalyan, Yojana. Now when you receive those food grains, it means your income has now increased or has got saved. Thereby, there is a question that are you using that income into consumption? Because if the consumption is increasing, it means the demand in the market is increasing. And if the demand is increasing, it means the economic recovery can be fast enough. But what happens when there is pandemic kind of situation? What happens when there is pandemic? People will not consume because they know that they do not have a future secure for themselves. So what will they do? They do not know that when will this pandemic end. They do not know that how will we approach. So whatever money they find, whatever cash they find, whatever income they find, what will they do with that? They will start increasing their savings. So therefore, when they start increasing their savings, this leads to what? Decrease in consumption, which means there is a decrease in demand. There is decrease in demand, and whenever there is a decrease in demand and there was decrease in production also, production bhi kam tha. Why? Because there was labor movement was restricted, capital movement was restricted, total lockdown was there. So production stopped, demand stopped. Even if now government gives loans, government gives fiscal stimulus, government gives what? More money into the market, government tries to inject more money into the market, what will happen with that capital? Tell me, what will happen with that capital if government starts to decrease the interest rates and give free loans, zero interest loans to the people of economy, to the people of, I would say India, to the entrepreneurs, to the businessmen? What will happen with that? Tell me. That money will directly flow away. They will take the loans, entrepreneurs, they will take the loans from Indian banks and then invest it somewhere else in the globe. Why will that happen? That is known as capital flight. Why will that happen? Because there is no demand. Even if they want to produce, for what will they produce? There is no demand in the market. So why will they produce? They will invest it somewhere else. So that is where the question comes, that how much stimulus should be given, when it should be given. And these are the questions which are the basic fundamentals for fiscal policy. Do you understand this? Now let's start the lecture. Simple. So the pandemic and Atmanirbhar Bharat. Just excuse me for my pronunciation if it happens. So Atmanirbhar Bharat, है ना? There were some, I would say, memes on this, not because of the concept of Atmanirbhar, but because of the pronunciation of it. Even our HMs and PMs were not able to pronounce it. So let's leave it aside. है ना? Before we start the lecture, I would like to highlight over here that we have simplified economy for you for all and every exam. For all and every exam, which is a one-day exam or an MCQ based exam, what you need to do is, you just need to scan this QR code. You just need to scan this QR code. There is one whole 9-hour marathon for all the concepts of economy, but for prelims only, for MCQ based questions only. Simple. Next, we have this marathon over here. You can scan the QR code, go to the marathon and watch all the PYQs of UPSC of past 10 years, 2015 to 2025. Simple. You can also download this document which has 120 pages and it summarizes and arranges all the NCERTs from class 6th to class 12th for your economy. It simplifies the economy. All the NCERTs and their raw chapters have been I would say summarized and then placed in a proper manner so that you understand economics better. You can download them from either from this group or from this group, or you directly ping me over here on the email or phone number. You will get it right away in your DM. Understood? Simple. Just DM me and I'll share it with you. Done? Chalo, let's begin. So COVID-19 was an unprecedented global disruption which caused economic recession and factory shutdown, we know this, and it also caused import restrictions. Further, this crisis brought in some opportunity for India also. So what was the opportunity and what was the challenge? India faced the challenge as global supply chains collapsed. So we faced this thing that we cannot depend on global supply chains. We cannot just have dependency, or I would say rather blind dependency on the global players. We cannot just trust Japan, China, USA that they will help us like we used to trust USA back then when we had a dependency of food imports from USA, say PL40, or when we depended on USA that it will provide us support in terms of defense when we have war with Pakistan, but at that point of time USA backed off. Even we cannot trust it, or we had rather friendship treaty with Russia. Therefore, also in the global supply chains, we cannot just trust that if we are having an assembly line where there are 4,000 workers working every day, 4,000 Indians, they are working in a factory of Maruti Suzuki in Gurgaon, and now we cannot trust this thing that all the Maruti Suzuki cars which are being assembled over here, their doors will come from Japan, the supply will continue, their, I would say, windshields will come from China, their tires will come from, say, Azerbaijan or somewhere else from all the world, and the rubber will come from, I would say, Africa. We cannot just trust this blindly, these supply chains. We cannot just trust that, okay, the OPEC countries will continue to supply us oil, Iran will continue to supply us oil. Why? Because COVID-19 showed us the reality of the world. It showed us that these supply chains are fragile. Not only COVID-19. After COVID-19, you saw there have been multiple instances, and the world is continuously under that shock. Russia attacked Ukraine. There had been a conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan, Pakistan and India, conflicts between Armenia and Azerbaijan, continuous conflict between Israel and Palestine, continuous conflict between USA and Iran. Why is this happening? Why? Tell me. Because pandemic showed us something, that at the global level all the supply chains are fragile. If you keep them disrupted, you can have your own economy grow. Why and how? Do you remember last time we discussed the multiplier effect? Even today we discuss somehow the multiplier effect, that if government wants to give the stimulus, when should it give the stimulus and in what form? Multiplier effect has more effect wherever there are closed economies, wherever the economies have less imports and more exports. Do you understand? All those economies which have more exports and less imports, they are rather better surviving and they have better multiplier effect. Similarly, you should also understand one more thing, that USA comparatively has a strong domestic economy. The domestic demand is stable, the domestic production is stable. India comparatively has a better domestic demand. Even there is no dearth of demand in India. The demand never decreases. There is no Keynesian kind of recession in India. But when you talk about China, there is no domestic demand. It has not worked on domestic demand. Rather, China is totally dependent on its exports. So therefore, these disruptions have been continuing since COVID-19. So therefore, the nation needed a strategy to respond so that we develop our own economy. We do not depend on the global supply chains, rather we should depend on ourselves. The self-reliance, the goal of self-reliance, which has been there since 1951, the first 5-year plan, till now is still there. So the vision of India, the vision of India and the new policy of self-reliant India or Atmanirbhar Bharat, this came into picture. And then we started to think in that direction. And you will see from 2019 to 2026, we will discuss in this lecture only how the policies of India changed and continue to change. Understood? So what is Atmanirbharta or what is Atmanirbhar Bharat? This is an idea, an ideology of India since 1951. So the primary project, or I would say objective, is to present India or position India in the global economy as an efficient, competitive and resilient partner, where all the economies of the world can look to India and look up to India, that yes, this country is a partner country, this country can be trusted, this country will be resilient, its economy will not go under slump. They will not just wake up one day and start attacking anyone. They will not just wake up one day and start devaluing their currency. They will not just dump their exports into our country. Self-reliant India, all the production of the India should happen in India itself. We should be able to support our economy at the best. That is self-reliance. It is not new to India, it has been a recurring theme since 1951. Interpretation has been fundamentally different post 2019. The old interpretation or the earlier approach has been there, and it was that we will impose high tariffs to insulate from foreign investments. We will focus on agriculture and heavy industries, and we will focus on employment intensive jobs. We will focus on employment intensive sectors because we have a large cheap labor. But the contemporary idea is that to provide India as a platform for all the people around the world who want to invest somewhere, who want to establish their supply chain somewhere, we can provide them a ground, a playground, a field where they can work, plant and invest. We welcome foreign direct investment, capital and technology. We leverage the best practices and we establish the best competition in India. Understood? So therefore, what are the 5 pillars of Atmanirbhar Bharat? That how can we actually achieve the goals of this Atmanirbhar Bharat? How? First is by making economy resilient, by developing the infrastructure which is necessary for India's identity, fast track economic development, by having 21st century technology driven ecosystem, efficiency, vibrant democracy where people choose their own leaders, where we utilize the domestic demand and supply chains so that we can prosper not only globally but also domestically. Understood? But there has been a trade-off in terms of pandemic. When we had pandemic, when we were under COVID-19's, I would say, impact at that time, do you remember that in the first lecture itself, we discussed the concept of trade-offs. What is a trade-off? A trade-off is very simple thing, that you choose one alternative and let the other alternative forgone. When you choose A and let B to go away. Okay? Don't take it personal. It doesn't mean that you will choose one person over the other. It means, है ना, मतलब it is not that माँ और बीवी में से एक को choose करना है. That is not, और वैसा कुछ नहीं है. It is like when you trade off between two things. Say you have economic opportunity, to either produce pens and guns. Your economy chooses to produce pens. Why? Because we can help education, and when the education increases, it means our demographic dividend increases, it means our economic growth increases. Do you understand this? But when the other country chooses to produce guns, say USA or Pakistan, now what they do is they supply too much of arms and ammunition to the world, due to which the destruction is doomed to happen. ठीक है ना? Which somehow becomes the burden of the world. Now I will not explain it because we have already discussed it multiple times. So therefore, moving ahead, in terms of pandemic, we had two things to do. Either we save our lives or we do what? हमारे पास, or rather I should, हमारे पास दो options थे. One was to save lives of people, and second was to have economy running. I'll give you two examples. When COVID happened, the second wave, there was Trump administration. Post 2018, there was Trump administration in USA. They said we do not need to go for lockdown. Strictly, उन्होंने lockdown नहीं किया. They totally refused to go for lockdown. And when they said this, and when they started to do this, that they will not go for lockdown. Why? Because they said that, okay, this is not that much of, I would say, problem. We can continue our economy. We will suffer economically. But India straight away imposed a lockdown. Why? Because the impact would have been much, much more intense in India as it had been in USA. And if you were aware of the fact, you can recall the videos which came from USA. Massively people were dying in USA. But here in India, we imposed, even deaths happened in India also, but we imposed a clear lockdown. Why? And we sacrificed on one thing, that was, we sacrificed on economic risks. We sacrificed on economic risks. We sacrificed the income losses, and we ensured a proper lockdown and social distancing, and we ensured that firms decrease down, or I would say rather firms stop or decrease their production. Then we also did one more thing, that people should not actually go in herds. Then slowly we introduced vaccination. We also had multiple other things. So therefore the dilemma in COVID-19 was that should we choose lives or should we choose livelihood? Now, India witnessed that there is irreplaceable value of life. So India recognized that GDP growth could recover later also. We should rather focus on what? Saving the population. And we let economic contraction happen. Our economic contraction went to minus 7.3% and then minus 24%. India witnessed a degrowth of 24% also. GDP contracted minus 7.3%, which is steepest since 1947 in 2020 and 2021. Further, the real GDP of India came down to 145.69 lakh crores in 2019 and 2025. However, if we see previously, before 2019, or 2020-2021, we had a minus 5.2% growth rate, but that was in 1979 and 1980. That is the only steepest. But after that, this year, 2020-2021 was the steepest, most contraction, economic contraction in Indian history. Understood? That is why UPSC asked a question in 2018, that was the question of opportunity cost. ठीक है, not because of this, but वो पहले ही पूछा गया था. 2018 में UPSC asked the question of, So therefore, services were hit. The most of the impact was on services because India is a service-led economy. India is known as office of the world. India is a BPO-based economy, BPO-led economy. We have cheap labor, and due to restrictions on movement, due to restrictions on working, due to restrictions on, I would say, having a closed space environments, we faced the biggest blow in services. Non-service and overall GDP contracted by around minus 7%. That is what we saw. Now, drivers of economic decline. Economy declined because of lockdowns, because of income and job loss, because of savings, as I discussed earlier also, that people started to increase their savings. And whenever the savings increase, it means that the consumption is decreasing. And whenever the consumption decreases, it means there is decrease in the demand. And whenever there is decrease in the demand, it means economy is going to face recession. And amazingly, John Maynard Keynes suggests that whenever there is a Keynesian kind of demand slump, whenever there is Keynesian recession in economy, what we should do is we should revive the demand. We should provide money to people, even by printing, even by dumping the money underground, even by asking people to dig pits and then fill the pits. We should just supply money to people so that the demand revives. But then there is a problem that will they save that money or will they use that money? Will the demand actually increase or not? That is a question. Healthcare costs, mounting medical expenditure further strained the household budgets and pre-existing slowdown because there was a demonetization in 2016 and GST implementation in 2017 that caused a slowdown in economy from 2016, 17, 18 and 19. These were the years when economy was already slowing down. The investment rates have been decreasing, and then came a final blow to it, that was COVID-19. And that is why it was a massive impact. It left a massive impact on Indian economy. Do you understand this? Next, the consumption and investment collapsed. Total consumption expenditure decreased and private investment also dropped by 10.8%. So that is something which is, you do not need to remember the facts, but yes, you do need to understand that what actually happened. Post that, we started recovery. So how did we start the recovery? By giving fiscal stimulus to the economy. An unprecedented fiscal deficit happened, 9.5% of GDP, fiscal deficit of 9.5%, or I would say 10% fiscal deficit, which currently we are struggling to keep it at 3%, which still is 4.4%. Why? Because government had to borrow a lot and spend a lot. Do you understand? Government borrowed a lot and then spent it a lot so that the economy recovers. That is the impact of fiscal stimulus. Monetary policy also, repo rates and CRR lowered to boost the consumption and liquidity in the economy. Why? Whenever you decrease the repo rate and CRR, what does that mean? Repo rate means the interest rates will start decreasing, and whenever the interest rates start decreasing, it means people will take more loans, and when people take more loans, they will do what? They will start investing these loans into somewhere, and whenever they start investing these loans, it means there will be growth in terms of production. So production will start increasing, and whenever production starts increasing, it means the employment in the economy will increase. It means the growth in the economy will increase. It means the money will start rotating more and the multiplier will increase. Do you understand? Simple. Also, whenever CRR is decreased, it means the banks have more money to lend. So whenever the banks have more money to lend, whenever banks start increasing their lendings, this will lead to what? Banks will usually give more loans, and whenever the amount of loans which are given by banks is increased, it will again push this, cycle further. Investments will increase more, growth will increase more, production will increase more, employment and other things will also increase. Do you understand? That is how monetary policy and fiscal policy work in tandem. But the objectives and the actions should be in synchronized manner. Unconventional measures, government deployed the innovative policy tools to support economic recovery and growth. New policy tools were implemented. New policy and agriculture was one of such bright spots among them. Agriculture actually saved the economy because the growth which was witnessed in agriculture, despite the overall GDP growth was minus 7.5%, agriculture had a positive growth of 3.6% at that time, because we had positive growth in agriculture, forestry and fishery during 2020-2021. It actually provided a livelihood and employment to a lot of people, to a lot of laborers who came back from urban areas and settled back into agriculture. It saved the rural economy. Why did that happen? Because there was natural monsoon, there were lockdown exemptions and essential services were provided. Also, uninterrupted operations happened. Machinery started moving easily, produced started increasing and field operations were quite simple. Cheap labor was available also for agriculture. That is why, because earlier the labor was available in the industry, now it came back to agriculture, so agricultural production will increase, obviously. Simple. Government support for agriculture. Government increased the MSP for wheat and paddy, protected farmers' income. Government provided cash transfers directly 6,000 rupees under PM Kisan Yojana. Government gave Manregas. Government started to increase I would say, release of money under Manrega funds. Further, the price recovery also helped to recover the agri commodity prices in the market. That is how the economy got revived. Even the rural areas also had some of the challenges, because COVID-19, the second wave of COVID-19, post-19 spread to rural areas. The first wave was somehow restricted to urban areas. Second wave spread to rural areas. And due to the reverse migration, when people returned from urban areas back to rural areas, that also started straining the local rural resources. Earlier, the person who used to earn 20, 30 or 50,000 in Mumbai, Delhi or Bangalore, he used to send some of it to home. And that home was enriched and replenished by all that money. Now that money also stopped and the person came back to home, and now all of the people are eating just out of a land parcel. That strained the rural resources. Further, the healthcare costs increased because out of pocket expenditure, people had to incur a lot of expenses in terms of medicine. A lot of medicine, sanitizers and all had to fulfill. Rising input cost, high diesel prices and agricultural input cost pressured farmers to increase more and more. Inflation also increased. Medical inflation also increased. Food inflation also increased. Even post this 2020-2021, we had the terms like thalinomics because of food inflation. Now the consumer price index averaged at 6.2% of inflation. Headline inflation reached 77-month high of 7.6% in October 2020. Why? Because supply disruptions happened nationwide. Lockdown was there in entire nation. Labor availability in mandis was not there. Transportation impediments, transport decreased. Excess rains damaged the kharif crops. And also panic buying and stocking of durable food items happened. Do you understand this? And then India introduced the production linked incentive scheme. Now, do remember this thing, that in this production linked incentive scheme, post this scheme, earlier we had Make in India. Now we introduced the other scheme, that is production linked incentive scheme. From here onwards, the growth trajectory of India will start changing. India will start investing in those sectors which will help India to develop its own resilience, to develop its own self-reliance, like production linked incentive scheme, like multiple other strategic sectors which were focused in PLI. Further, not only PLI, China Plus One strategy was adopted. Further, electronic component manufacturing scheme was introduced, and multiple other schemes were introduced, even employment incentive scheme was introduced. Now tomorrow in the next lecture, we will continue this from here, that is PLI. From PLI onwards, we will continue the strategy of India from COVID-19, I would say 2020-2021 to 2026. Today we actually understood that what COVID was, why stimulus is necessary, how stimulus actually works, what all measures did we actually take when the pandemic hit us, and how economy actually recovers. I hope that you understood all of it. I thank you all for being here, and I wish you all the best for being here and for your future also, for your exam also, and a good day ahead. So with this, I'll take a leave. I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, Jai Hind.